Bibles, Genesis chapter 19. Genesis chapter 19. That went home, right? You're not leaving one of my very expensive Bibles here during the week, are you? All right. Just saying. That's like a $200 Bible. You know? You should probably go to Sunday school.
You're the one that started running your mouth.
Before this message changes from being about Lot to being about his wife.
Go ahead.
All right. Genesis chapter 19. We were talking about Lot. We're going to close this chapter up here. And let's see if I can catch up to where we are at. And go back. There we go. So last week we talked about Lot carrying the message, right? And he did it how he carried the message. That he carried the message to his sons-in-law. He did so believingly, right? He did so promptly. He did so courageously, and he did so faithfully. Right? So for all of Lot's bad, right? Lot wasn't all bad, and so that's kind of the way, right? That we are in our Christian life sometime, right? And maybe you think you lean on the good side, and maybe you do. I don't know, but you for all you're good, you're not all good, right? And so anyways, that's where we find Lot here. We see the contempt here for the declaration in verse number 14 there. It says, "And Lot went out and spake unto his sons-in-law, which married his daughters, and said, Up, get you out of this place, for the Lord will destroy this city. But he seemed as one that mocked unto his sons-in-law." So Lot goes out, right, to use our present day language, right? We would say he preached the gospel, but he didn't get any decisions, right? None of his sons-in-law decided to trust him in this one. In fact, not only did he not get any decisions, his message was rejected. Right? He was pretty much flat turned down by him. And so, in fact, they showed some contempt. They showed contempt, basically, for his declaration. They said, "You seem like one who mocks." And so, he couldn't have got a worse response to the message that he had. And so, we see here what was wrong, right, with the meeting that Lot, why didn't Lot get any decisions, right? We would say sometimes in our present day and age, when somebody doesn't get the result they're looking for out of a meeting, we say, well, maybe they need to change their tactic, need to change this or they need to change that. Lot's problem wasn't that, right? Lot needed a time machine. That's what Lot needed. Lot needed to be able to go back in time. And so, he needed to be able to go back in time and fix the situation, because the situation was that they weren't listening to Lot because Lot had not been listening to God. All right, that's the long and short of it. So, the first thing we see here under this would be we see the worldliness of Lot. Right, Lot's message lost its effectiveness because Lot was a worldly Christian. And the same thing happens to us, right? In our lives as believers. Man, we lose, the message can lose its effectiveness. Our message can lose its effectiveness if we're worldly as well. I'll give you a couple of quotes from some theologians here. Maybe not. I guess I did not update the slideshow here. But F.B. Meyer said, an inconsistent life, my slide just left me, there we go. He said, an inconsistent life cannot arrest the wanderer or startle the sleeper into wide awakeness about his soul. People say that we must conform a little to the manner of our time if we would exert a saving influence over men. It is a fatal mistake. If we live in Sodom, we shall have no power to save the people of Sodom. You must stand outside of them. If you would save them from the gurgling rapids, you cannot level Sodom up, but it will certainly level you down and laugh at you when you try to speak. And that is the situation, right, that Lot finds himself in. He's trying to present them the gospel, and rather than listening to Lot, they just find him to be amusing. Then you see C.H. Mackintosh said, to attempt to reprove the world's ways while we profit by association with it is vanity. The world will attach very little weight to such reproof and such testimony. It is vain to speak of approaching judgment while finding our place, our portion, and our enjoyment in the very scene which is to be judged. W.H. Griffith Thomas made the statement, his testimony had no power. He had lived too long as one of them, without any very real difference to allow of his message being of any avail. When the testimony of the life does not agree with the testimony of the lips, the latter goes unheeded. And that's where Lot finds himself, right? What he was saying didn't match how he'd been living. And so Lot finds himself in a bad way. If our message doesn't seem to be convincing the world of God's message, then we ought to examine our lives, right, and see whether our lives are lining up with the message. So one of the best promotions for a church, one of the best evangelistic methods for a church is the holy living of its members, right? So then you see the wickedness of the listeners here. You see the wickedness of Lot's listeners in this city. They all rejected God's message, right? And not all rejections of God's message are the fault of the messenger. In some cases, it's the fault. It may be the fault of the speaker, right? Absolutely, may be the fault of the speaker, but in some cases, it's just the hardness of the hearts of the audience. And in this case, Lot's not the best, may not be the most qualified speaker, but he's also preaching to a very unqualified audience, right? They are set on rejection. Today, everybody wants to blame somebody else for their problems and for their faults. That's a worldly philosophy, right? This thing of looking for a reason why you have the problems you have, right? The reason I have this sin problem, the reason that I have these issues is because of my mama and my daddy, or because of the culture and the environment, or the internet, or whatever it may be. And so that's where we find people today. And so modern psychology has pretty aggressively advocated for that way of thinking. And a lot of Christian psychology really has too. They don't want to blame the sinner for the sin, right? They want to find another means, and so it's the age-old adage, right? Of the devil made me do it, and yeah, ultimately the devil is responsible for sin, right? It came about because of the devil. Came about because of Adam giving in to him, but came about because of the devil. But not every sin in your life is the devil's fault, right? In fact, the vast majority of it is our own. And that's what we find with Lot's sons-in-law here, right? They chose a path. They chose their path. They had an opportunity here. This is the fork in the road for them. Lot may have had his fork in the road moment before he ever entered into Sodom. But they may never have had a fork in the road moment, but this is their fork in the road moment, to choose God over Sodom, to take God's way over the world's way. They choose a path of Their path they chose was vile. We know it's vile because of what we read about the city and what we read about the people that are in that city, right? They were vile people. Surrounded the house. They wanted those men drug out. They would have raped Lot's daughters. Right? They were vile people. And so they chose a path that was vile. They chose a path that was hard-hearted about sin. I mean, can you get any more hard-hearted about your sin than to hear that, listen, these angels came tonight, and here's the situation. All the men in town came, right, and wanted to rip them out of the house, and I even offered your sisters-in-law to them, and blah, 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 right? But they've told me we got to get out of Dodge, and you say, nope, I'm standing with the men of Sodom. Can you get any more hard-hearted about sin than that? Right? And they chose a path that encouraged them to reject the truth, divine truth in this situation, right? But that made them reject the truth. And listen, we do the same thing, don't we? Can't you think of times in your life when you came to a crossroads where you had an opportunity to choose God over your friends or over this world or whatever it might be, or even over yourself, right? But you chose the vile path. You chose the hard-hearted path. You chose the path that rejected divine truth, right? I've done it. Man, I can go back in my mind to some of those fork-in-the-road moments in my life where I made the wrong decision. Thank God, right, that there's more than one fork in the road. And God always gives you a fork in the road that'll lead you back to Him, too. But if you keep choosing the wrong way, it just gets worse and worse. And so anyways, the sons and the sons-in-law here that Lot goes and speaks to that decide to stay in the city, they were not executed for Sodom's sin. You know what they were executed for? Their own. Right? They were executed for, they went down for their own sin. That's the situation that we find sometimes. You'll hear people, there's a lot of discussion around the concept of original sin, right? Whether you're born with sin or whether you grow into it, right? Are you innocent when you're born, or right? All this other stuff. The Catholics don't believe that you're innocent when you're born. They believe that you're already a sinner. They don't believe basically they don't really trust the concept of age of accountability, and so that's why you get baptized as a baby. It's a covenant covering until you're old enough to make the decision for yourself, which is what confirmation is. You get confirmed to confirm the baptism, the belief of your parents, right? And so that's what confirmation is. So that's the concept that takes place there. And so, right, as Bible believers, we believe in an age of accountability. There's some discussion about what the age of accountability is, right? Some people will tell you it's 13. Some people will tell you it's younger than that, 6, 7, and 8, somewhere in there. I think basically the age of accountability is probably pretty malleable, and has a lot to do with your understanding of sin and your understanding of your part in sin, right? But nobody has ever gone to hell because of the sins of their nation, right? Nobody has ever gone to hell. Nobody has ever gone to hell because of the sins of their parents, right? Or the sins of others. They've gone down for their own sin. You rejected Christ, right? Now you can say, well, that's because I was raised in an atheist home, went to an atheist school, graduated from an atheist college, right? And all of my friends were atheists and everything else. Well, you can make whatever excuse you want, but in the end, you're going down for your own. That's what happens here with Lot's children, right? So the statement that's made here, he seemed as one that mocked unto his sons-in-law, right? That doesn't mean that Lot delivered this message in a joking manner, right? Hey guys, we probably need to get out of town because, well, fire and brimstone's coming. Right? That's not the concept. Right? The concept is that two things, right? First, that Lot's worldliness made his message seem, offset his message, right? Made his message didn't fit. And then secondly, you see the inability of his sons-in-law or their unwillingness to properly evaluate the message that was being delivered to them and the intent of the message. Instead, what you see is they decided that they would judge the messenger instead of the message. So they looked and said, Lot, you seem like somebody who mocks. We're not going to listen to you because you're just crazy, old Lot. Man, you've been living in Sodom this whole time, acting like God's got nothing to do with your life, and now you suddenly want to rise up and tell us the end is near. Come on, Lot. Right? They judge the messenger instead of the message. There's a lot of people that do that stuff. Right? If I'm honest, right, and probably if you're honest too, you can think of some times when you judged the messenger instead of the message. You heard something about somebody, and then you went and you heard them preach or them teach something, or maybe even right just at a family function or at a function with your friends, they said something to you about how you needed to get back on track, and you said, "Oh, who are you to tell me to get back on track? I know what you've done." I'm telling you right now, I've done it. I'm telling you right now, I've done it. Right, I've been around a lot of preachers, and I know a lot of preacher gossip. Right, there's one thing preachers love to do more than preach. They love to gossip. So I know a lot of stuff about a lot of preachers. I don't know whether it's true or not, but I know a lot of stuff about them. Right, but I've judged some messages by what I had heard about a guy. And dismiss something that they were saying, not because I didn't feel like what they were saying was true, but because I didn't feel like they should be saying it. Right? And you've probably heard that from some other people before too, right? Well, yeah, sure, they may have said that, but, I know thus and such, and, I know that they stole the 10-cent candy when they were 12 years old, and so, I don't think you probably should listen to them about the 10 Commandments. Right? Well, I'll tell you what, I want to listen to that preacher because he's divorced. He may be, right? And I got some feelings on whether I think that a preacher who is divorced should be in ministry or not. That may not change the message that preacher is delivering. See, that one sticks in our craw a little, huh? Right? Well, I know what that preacher said. I know what that preacher did, and so I don't listen to what he's saying. That's what Lot's problem is. That's what Lot's sons-in-law problem was. Instead of evaluating the message, they evaluated the messenger. And I'm not saying that we should never evaluate the messenger. I'm just saying before you evaluate the messenger, evaluate the message. Right? Evaluate the message. Is what they're saying true? Now, maybe they shouldn't be the one to say it. But if what they're saying is true, you probably ought to listen either way, right? And think about it, right? This is, by the way, a pretty common theme, this theme of mockery, right? I don't know whether I put these ones in here. Let me see real quick. Nope, I did not. I opened the wrong wrong thing for this somehow. And I don't know how I did it. But it's probably not going to let me do it now, is it? Let's see if it'll let me open it. I don't know if I didn't update it or what I did. Let's see. I must not have updated this once I wrote it all out. I guess that's where we're going to take it from then. But I'll give you some scriptures, some This is a pretty common theme, by the way, in Scripture, this thing of the mocking, evaluating the speaker instead of evaluating the message, right? Here's Acts chapter 2, verse 13 through verse 15, right? The apostles preaching on right here, right? Others mocked, right? Others mocked, said, "These men are full of new wine." But Peter, standing up with the 11, lifted up his voice and said unto them, "Ye men of Judea, and all ye that dwell at Jerusalem, be this known unto you, and hearken to my words, for these are not drunken as ye suppose, seeing it is but the third hour of the day." Right? What did on the day of Pentecost, what did the crowd do? They judged the messenger, not the message. Right? You know why we judge the messenger instead of the message? We're trying to avoid the message. That's why. We look for something in that guy's life, some reason why what he's saying ain't true. Right? I'll give you another one here. Acts chapter 26 and verse number 24. Acts chapter 26 and verse number 24 says, and he thus spake for himself. Festus said with a loud voice, "Paul, thou art beside thyself, much learning doth make thee mad." What does Festus say? Festus says, "Paul, you're crazy. Not your message is crazy, but you're crazy, Paul. All that learning's made you crazy, Paul." All right? Evaluating the messenger instead of the message. Give you another one here. Go back to John. John chapter 7 and verse number 20. John chapter 7 and verse number 20. The people answered and said, "Thou hast a devil who goeth about to kill thee." Right? Jesus says, "Man, you guys have been trying to kill me from day one." And they said, "Thou hast a devil who goeth about to kill thee." You know what they said? They said, "Wow, you crazy. Man, Jesus, you crazy." Right? The same thing happens. We'll look at one more here. Matthew chapter 11, verse number 18 real quick. Matthew chapter 11 and verse number 18. Matthew chapter 11, verse number 18. "The Son of Man came eating and drinking, and they say, Behold, a man gluttonous and a winebibber and a friend of publicans and sinners, but wisdom is justified of her children." Right? He says, yep. He says just exactly the same, right? He says in verse 18, "For John came neither eating nor drinking, and they say he hath the devil." He says, John came, he didn't eat or drink, and you say, "Well, he's got a devil." I come, I eat and drink, and you say, "He's gluttonous, he's a winebibber." Right? He's a drunk. You know what he said? He said, "Man, you guys, all you guys want to do is just keep looking at the messenger. All right? Listen, it is a problem for us, isn't it? That we want to evaluate the messenger and avoid the message. So we'll sit in church. I've heard Russell Anderson preach on several different occasions. He's a guy that's multimillionaire. He's built 3 or 4 Bible colleges. Was a part of Dr. Howes' church for a while. You have Russell Anderson come in to preach. You know why? Get people to give. That's why. Right? So, guy's given millions and millions of dollars away over the years. And every time that I have sat there and listened to Russell Anderson preach and thought to myself, easier for you to say. Right? Of course, easy for you to say. You got $1 million, man. If I had $1 million, it'd be easy for me to say it too. Right? And so listen, people do it with preachers all the time. Preacher gets up and preaches about how you need to be in church Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, right? All that kind of stuff. And people say, "Well, yeah, easy for you to say. That's your whole life. That's all you got to do is get up and go to church Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday night. That's all you got to do." Easy for you to say. Right? The point is not whether it's easy or hard for the guy standing behind the pulpit to do it. The question is he right? Is that message right? You should be in church Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. Is that message right? Is that message right that you ought to go out? You should go out and you should evangelize, right? You should tell others about Christ. whether that's Saturday morning or whatever it might be, right? You should go out and tell others about Christ, right? People go, well, yeah, easy for you to say, it's easy for you to talk to people, or man, it's easy for you to say you've got every Saturday off, or easy for you to say because, you got this or that, and all you're doing is you're avoiding the message. The question's not whether it's easy for the guy that's saying it to say it. The question is what's being said right? Are you supposed to tell others about Christ? Are you supposed to give? The number of times that I have sat in my office and counseled people, right, in an effort to keep their marriage together, and had somebody say, well, that's easy for you to say, right? You don't have to live with her. You don't have to live with him. The question isn't whether it's easy for me to say or not. The question is it true or not? Right? Easy for you to say that, that I should stay married to her or stay married to him. You don't know what they've done, and it's easy for you to say you're not the one who has to get over it, and you're not the one who has to get through it. Listen, there's a lot of things that are easier for you to say than it is for me to say. But at the end of the day, the question is not whether it's easy to say or not. The question is it true or not? That's where Lot finds himself, right? He's given them the message, and they're pretty flatly rejecting it and saying, Lot, you're crazy, right? So what is that to say? It's to say that we shouldn't always account the lack of accepting God's message, right? We shouldn't always chalk that up to the messenger. Not always the messenger's fault. But that is not to say that the messenger has no bearing on it, right? My job as a preacher is to remove as many obstacles, right, from your accepting the message that God's giving you as I possibly can. What does that mean? That means that I should live a life that's as in keeping with that as I possibly can, right? That is as in keeping with the message as I possibly can. And you ought to do the same, right? Then, listen, not every pastor, right, has been 100% faithful or even 100% faithful to the Word of God. But that doesn't mean that you have an excuse for rejecting the message. You're not going to get to stand before God and go, well, yeah, God, I'll tell you what, I'd have listened, but look who you sent. This is your fault, God. I mean, can't you just imagine Lot's sons-in-law standing before God? God saying, what are you knuckleheads thinking? I sent Lot to tell you. They said, well, yeah, you should have sent Abraham. We'd have listened to Abraham. But Lot was the same kind of sinner we were. He hung out at the bar with us, shot pool with us, got drunk with us. Man, Cat called, all the girls with us. I mean, come on, God, you should have sent us Abraham. If you'd sent it, this is your fault, God. We'd have listened to Abraham. We died because of you, God. It's your fault. Well, that's the same thing that a lot of Christians are going to try and do, right? I mean, not really, because you really can't, but right? I mean, but it's the same thing that a lot of Christians in concept do when they sit in church and reject what's being said because they don't like who's saying it. Right? So they just say, well, I would never listen to that guy when it comes to this, or I'd never listen to that guy when it comes to money, or I'd never listen to that guy when it comes to my children. I'd never listen to that guy when, well, listen, if you got to be perfect to preach, there's no preachers. If a guy's got to be perfect to deliver the message to you, you've never heard a message. You've never listened. Right? Listen, it might be, right? We look sometimes, we go, look at that. That church's attendance is going down. It's because of the preacher. The preacher must be doing something wrong. Might be. Also might be the people doing something wrong. Could be that church is made up of human beings, And human beings are more fickle than, man, you could ever believe. Man, one day they are for you and the next day they're against you. All right? So it may be that the preacher is got a problem, right? He doesn't have a compassion for souls, or right, he's not as loving maybe as he should be, or maybe he's had a sin problem, right? That may be. But it also may be that people's hearts are hard in our day. And it's hard to break through to people. Hard to reach people. And it's getting harder. Right? I mean, the Ring doorbell has become the new gateway to the home. Used to be if you knocked on somebody's door, they would answer. They don't answer no more. Now they just look at their camera. Right? So maybe the difficulty is the hardness of men's hearts. Maybe it's because the preacher doesn't have compassion. Maybe it's because the people don't have compassion too. Right? Anyways, but all of that to say, right, that rejection, at the end of the day, rejection is the blame for rejection, right, lies at the heart of the one who is rejecting the message. It is as much fault as you want to lay at Lot's feet for his sons-in-law not listening. And I agree that Lot's life should have lined up, and he should have removed that obstacle so that his sons-in-law wouldn't have been able to say, Lot, you've been living just like us. Yes, sound like one that mocks, right? So Lot should have cleaned up his life. He should have removed as many obstacles as he could, but he didn't. But the reason that the message was rejected was because they rejected the message. That's why. Right? Ultimately, the reason that the message is rejected is because the hardness of the heart of the one who is rejecting the message. You know how I know that? Because you've looked past sins and problems in other people's lives and listened to them anyways. If they were saying what you wanted to hear. Cracks me up, right? I've made the statement before. The guys will post all these quotes by all these Calvinist guys, and all over Facebook and stuff. And I've said to some of my friends that do it, you know, why don't you post something by T.D. Jakes? He says as much right stuff as John Calvin does. Says, listen, T.D. Jakes says as much right stuff as John MacArthur does. He's got as many quotable quotes as John MacArthur does. Right, if that's all it's about. You know why they don't post T.D. Jakes? They don't like the messenger. They like that messenger. Right? And listen, that's what we do. Listen, whether you believe or respect the truth has nothing to do with how godly the messenger is. At the end of the day, it has everything to do with how godly you are. And we don't like that because that means that I'm responsible, that it's my fault that I'm not listening. It's my fault that I'm not living the life I should be living. That chafes us. We don't like it. Because if I can't point the finger at the messenger and say it's the messenger's fault, I would have listened if it wasn't for him. If I can't do that, then that means that God presented the truth to me and I flatly refused the truth, therefore I refused God. I don't care who the preacher is that stands up and says you ought to give, you ought to tithe, you ought to give an offering. I don't care who he is. I don't care how many problems he's had with money, right? If you say, nope, not me, I'd do it. But that preacher, let me tell you what the problem is. You're not saying no to that guy. You're saying no to God. Preacher stands up and says, man, you shouldn't be angry. Definitely shouldn't be angry without cause. And you say, well, yeah, sure, but I saw you throw hands with somebody at the softball field, so who do you think you are? Tell me not to be angry. Let me tell you something. You're not saying no to the preacher. You're saying no to God about it. Preacher stands up and says, man, you ought to evangelize, you ought to tell people about Christ. And you say, well, yeah, sure. Well, I'll start doing it when you start doing it, pal. The person you're saying that to is God, not him. Not because he's so spiritual that, he stands in the place of God for you. It's not that. It's that the message isn't his. I'll close with this, right? Understand this. All truth, period, all truth belongs to God, not to the messenger. No matter who the messenger is. I don't care if the messenger is Joe Biden. All truth belongs to God. You don't have to believe me. You don't have to believe what I say. You don't have to believe anything that I preach. But you better believe what God says. And you better not think that you're going to stand before God and you're going to say, well, yeah, I'd have listened, but it was Pastor Cook. That ain't going to fly. If it didn't fly for Lot's sons-in-law, who had the best excuse for why they didn't listen? Can you think of a better excuse for why you didn't listen than it was Lot delivering the message? I mean, come on, man. It's Lot. God said there's no excuse. There's no excuse for us either. All right, you're dismissed. We'll be back in here in about 10 minutes.